And then I had that moment where I thought, okay, do I go back to drama, or do I now study law? And I think I felt that after all the instability in my life, I needed to pursue a more stable career. So I chose law at that point, and I haven't looked back since. So naturally, I then went on to train at a law firm, quite a traditional law firm in London. I initially thought I would become a litigator. Well, what happened to me during my training contract is I started working with a very up-and-coming technology lawyer called Kit Burden. So then I decided, actually, I would like to study technology law. Innovation in law means something new or something different, but for the advancement of law. Yeah, and sort of embracing change, but not just for the sake of it. Thinking that actually we're advancing overall what we're trying to do. Whether that's in terms of advancing the ambit of what the law can do and how it can help people, or whether it's building in greater efficiencies as well. If you've not got an innovation mindset within your organization, if you haven't got a change champion, if you haven't properly analyzed all your internal processes to see actually where you need the technology, where the technology can actually help you, but you start by just looking at the product and thinking you're going to somehow squeeze it into an organization that already exists, that's the wrong approach. So I think the innovation must start without the technology. And then you think, how do we want to change? What are our processes?
Hi, Paula. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with Prologue today.
Thank you so much, Shreya. I know it's taken us a while to coordinate our diaries, but I'm delighted that we've been able to do so finally.
Great. So for everybody that's tuning in today, Paula is running her own consultancy called PaLiDa. We'll get into that towards the later half of the interview. But Paula started out as an associate at a law firm. Then for very many years, she's worked at multiple companies as part of their in-house teams. And she's also been the Chief Innovation Advisor at World Commerce and Contracting, and is currently the Innovation Legal Advisor in residence at World CC. I mean, of course, Paula, you've had such like diverse roles across the board, right? I want to understand how you would describe yourself in a sentence. And of course, I'm not just talking about professionally, right? Like, who are you as a person?
Yeah, well, I would say as a person, I like to always think of myself as empathetic, and I think I am throughout my career. I think that would be something that resonates both when I was a leader and a manager with those that I managed, but also in terms of now with what I do in innovation. I like to empathize with the user. So that is something I think that a word that well describes me. I'm also fun, I think, and I love life. And I love change, actually. I've discovered more and more that I like change as I get older.
Wow, that's amazing to hear. So just going back to the roots, right? What really drove you to pursue law?
Well, it's interesting. So I could have gone, you know, I had that sort of sliding door moment where I could have gone two ways. I actually started studying drama. My first degree was in drama at Trinity College, Dublin. Okay. And it's funny that a few people kind of, you kind of made a face there. When I say my first love was drama and then my second love was law. But interestingly, there is a crossover between drama and law. Okay. Because when I was at Trinity, most of the people in the drama society at Trinity were those studying law. Of course, I was studying drama, which was, but when you think about it, the courtroom drama, I think sometimes I think lawyers who initially, when they go to study law, think about the courtroom. And in a way, there's that sort of crossover between wanting to play a part in the courtroom and wanting to play a part in a play. So there is actually an overlap. And what happened then is, at the grand old age of 19, I met my first husband. I dropped out of university because I met him in London to actually stay with him in London. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we were divorced at the grand old age of 26. And then I had that moment where I thought, okay, do I go back to drama? Or do I now study law? Because that was my second choice, always at university. And I think I felt that after all the instability in my life, I needed to pursue a more stable career, because let's face it, it doesn't matter how good you are at drama, it's an unstable career. So I chose law at that point, and I haven't looked back since.
Wow, that's amazing.
So there, a bit of a mouthful, a bit of a story. But
yeah. And you first started out at a traditional law firm practicing law. Yeah. And from there, you've sort of now come to the field of legal innovation, right? Can you walk us through that entire journey of law firm, then in-house, being an in-house counsel, and now working literally at the forefront of law and the change in the legal industry?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, when I started off my legal career, because I did go back, I was actually 27 when I went back to study law, starting at King's College London. I remember feeling I had to pinch myself that first day in the theatre, where we were being spoken to by Professor Guest, one of the gurus in contract law. And I thought, wow, here I am, I've kind of turned my life around and I'm starting law at King's College London. So it was a wonderful moment. One thing I knew for sure, this was now going to be my profession, and I was going to try and make a success out of it. So nothing was going to kind of take me off in different directions. So I felt I was open to change, but the law was going to be the constant. So naturally, I then went on to train at a law firm, quite a traditional law firm in London. I initially thought I would become a litigator. Again, I think a little bit of that drama. I probably thought litigation was more connected with drama. But what happened to me during my training contract is I started working with a very up-and-coming technology lawyer called Kit Burden. And he became a partner at, it was Paula Doyle Gilbert at that time, by the age of 30. He was very, very innovative. He was very energetic, and he was a fantastic mentor. So then I decided, actually, I would like to study technology law. Briefly before in between my sort of drama days and starting law, I had done some software engineering. So I had a little bit of that technology brain as well. So my career kind of led me into private practice in technology law. Mm-hmm. And then I was about 6 years qualified. I was working at that point for Walgotcho and Manges, a New York law firm, when a headhunter called me. And they were looking for a European counsel for a technology company called Micromuse. And I was going to be their sole EMEA counsel. So I actually found that quite interesting, went and met them and sort of made the transition. So in a way, it was like, okay, well, I was always attracted to business. And I think the one thing I found about private practice law, I wasn't really close enough to the business. So therefore, when I got the sort of tap on the shoulder, I thought, oh yeah, I can do that. And then 6 months later, they were bought by IBM.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I became subsumed into IBM, and then ensued a career of 13 years with IBM. So.
Wow. And what's it like working at a soft, I mean, it's like a conglomerate of many, many things in tech. What's it like working at one of the biggest companies in tech, and how do their corporate legal departments function?
Yeah, well, to be honest, when I heard, I remember I was 6 months into my employment with Micromuse, and the general counsel, I reported directly into the general counsel. She was based in San Francisco. She called me and she said, I have my own office. She said, can you close the door? And then she said, are you sitting down? And I said, yes. And she said, we've just been bought by IBM. Now you can imagine, I was the sole European counsel. And then, to be honest, I was very much of mixed minds. I thought, now I have my autonomy. I was working very closely with the CFO of the business. I was doing some really interesting things. I was part of the executive team. And then I thought, well, who am I going to be in IBM? I mean, at that point, IBM had almost 400,000 employees. It has reduced in size considerably since, but it was massive. But in my nature is always, I'm a sort of glass half full person rather than a glass half empty. So if presented with a challenge or an opportunity, I always try to look on the positive side. So the first thing, I was actually living in Borough at the time. And the first thing I wanted to find out, because I knew IBM had offices outside London, I got onto their switchboard to find out where the legal team was situated. And when I heard they were situated in South Bank in London, I was overjoyed because I could walk to South Bank from Borough every day. So that was an immediate plus. And then I thought about it, okay, well, it's a large organization, lots of opportunity. And actually, that's what ensued. To be honest, I had a great 13 years there. I joined at a time where they were very acquisitive. I think in the period between 2003, 2010, I'm not sure of the exact time frame, but they did acquire something like 130 software and SaaS companies.
Wow.
Yeah, they were very, very acquisitive. In fact, one of the business people who led those integrations, Joanne Chekalowska, I'm still, very much in contact with. Yeah, so I got to know Joanne. She was integrating Micromuse into IBM, and she encouraged me to sort of embrace this change, which I did. And really, I never looked back. I had many roles within IBM. I became more senior. But what I found about large organizations, and this is something I would advise everybody who enters into, to work in a large organization, it's about finding those touch points that you can connect with and kind of navigating those to discover what you can do, how you can change things, how you can make decisions. And I actually found that my passage through IBM became by making those connections and finding out who those people are and kind of joining the dots. It all of a sudden felt like a much smaller organization and not this mammoth organization that was going to overwhelm me.
That's actually great advice, I would think, because when you said 400,000 people, I was wondering, how do you even navigate?
Where to start?
Yeah.
I did have a great first boss who I'm also quite friendly with, called Nuzat Sayani. Actually, she's originally, her origins are from India as well. And she was a great help to me integrating into IBM. And we're still friends to this day. And I'm still in contact with many people. So very, very decent legal team as well. And that made a difference, also very welcoming. And again, that's why I feel with business, empathy, getting to know the people you're working with and empathizing with them and putting yourself in their shoes really allows a company and a team to come together in a much more efficient, effective way, really, for everyone.
So at IBM, because it was a tech company, how were lawyers and the corporate legal department leveraging tech there? Were you doing something differently from the market in general?
Yeah, interesting. And I left in 2018, and I think it probably has changed a bit. To be honest, at that point, the legal team weren't fantastic at embracing some technology. We were advising IBM on their technology, and actually Watson at the time, the Watson was really accelerating in terms of the kind of products they were offering and what they were doing. And one of them actually
perhaps it'll be useful if you can tell our audience a little bit about Watson also.
Yeah, so Watson, I don't know if the audience has seen the program Jeopardy. It was back in, well, I'm not sure which year it was it 2015, 2016? It was like at the forefront of one of the first AI tools, artificial intelligence tools. And actually IBM Watson competed on a game show in the US called Jeopardy against a human for answering questions. It was you know, a sort of quiz program, and actually the IBM Watson won against the human. So that really was sort of, you know, very innovative at that time, and it kind of brought artificial intelligence into everybody's living room. And as a result, it was a very powerful product, and IBM went on to develop lots of products. One of the first developments was Watson Health, where they were actually using the artificial intelligence to help diagnose cancer and find the best treatments for cancer. So they worked with some big health organizations in the US. And then actually they developed a Watson Legal. I was around when that developed, but actually at that time we weren't using it within IBM, but I think they possibly are now. And I know around the time I left, certainly the legal department was focused on how can we integrate and use more technology to help us be more efficient, because from the time I joined to the time I left, the size of the legal department had shrunk considerably. I mean, that was a time where a lot of organizations were trying to consolidate their legal teams. So they weren't really hiring, they were more reducing the size and trying to build in greater efficiencies. So of course, legal technology is very much part of that process.
So that was very insightful, Paula. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm wondering, what does innovation in law mean to you?
Well, to me, I think innovation generally means something new, something different. But innovation in law means something new or something different, but for the advancement of law. Because otherwise, what's the point in innovation? Yeah, and sort of embracing change, but not just for the sake of it. Thinking that actually we're advancing overall what we're trying to do, whether that's in terms of advancing the ambit of what the law can do and how it can help people, or whether it's building in greater efficiencies as well, so that we can also, and additionally, get rid of some of the more mundane legal work, so that lawyers and legal professionals in general can concentrate on the more impactful elements of law. So it's all those, it's a mix of all those things, really.
And do you think it's mostly sitting at the intersection of law and technology, or are there other ways in which law can be innovated?
Well, to be honest, I think if you're thinking about innovation, you should never start with technology.
Okay.
You should always start within your organization. And actually what we're finding, and at my time at World CC, what we found, speaking to our members, was that in general, those who'd started thinking about, this is a great technology product, I want to implement it and implement it fast to build in better efficiencies, it hadn't worked. There have been a huge amount of failed technology implementations. And what's generally been discovered, because I've also talked to those on the implementation side, both the customers, but also those working with the customers to help them implement the technology, if you've not got an innovation mindset within your organization, if you haven't got a change champion, if you haven't properly analyzed all your internal processes to see actually where you need the technology, where the technology can actually help you, but you start by just looking at the product and thinking you're going to somehow squeeze it into an organization that already exists, that's the wrong approach. So I think the innovation must start without the technology. And then you think, how do we want to change? What are our processes? By the way, that's the first thing, because there are a lot of legal departments don't really understand what their things happen, and different people do things at different parts of the chain, the contract chain or the legal chain. But there often hasn't been somebody really looking at it end to end. So that's what I would advise. And sometimes, to be honest, in my role as consultant, that's what I'm talking to my clients about. You really need to think about where you are today. Then we can think about where you might want to go. And then we can think about technology.
That's actually a great roadmap. And you did say, you talked about the culture of innovation and that mindset. Do you also have a roadmap of perhaps gauging it and then starting out on really getting that cultural change in an organization?
Yeah, actually, well, I'll tell you about my experience. And basically, my experience at the moment is very much on this sort of contract design simplification. You're probably aware that I work quite closely with Stefania Passera on that. You'll have seen us on LinkedIn and World CC. We've done a lot of stuff together, and increasingly more stuff together. What we found is there's really a symbiotic relationship between us and our skills. Stefania very much the designer, me coming from the legal background, probably looking at the sort of practical side more and sort of bringing the two together. And what we found, it's really incredible, Shreya. I would say 2022 has been a bit of a landmark year. Certainly for contract design and simplification. We know that technology innovation is accelerating as well. But a lot of large organizations have been coming to us saying, we know we need to change our contracts. We're now looking at them, and somehow they don't seem to cut the mustard in an innovative world. They're hard to read, they're hard to understand. Even the lawyers are struggling with them. Because another thing that we've discovered during the pandemic, our attention spans have reduced considerably. We were sort of online for so long, we don't want to concentrate on reading as much as we used to. And also with the use of fast media, phones, we're used to getting feeds, etc. It's actually the amount of time lawyers really spend reading 100-page documents now has reduced considerably, also with the advancement of technology. So we need to make our contracts better and easier to understand. But what we're finding, and sometimes we work with startups, getting that sort of roadmap and that change process and that design thinking in place in a startup is quite easy, actually. Because you've already got somebody thinking that way, and they're saying, we want to look innovative. We want our contracts to be part of our brand. By the way, organizations are waking up to the fact that their templates are part of their brand. You can't design a fantastic product, say to customers, we're a very customer friendly organization, and then slap an unintelligible, one-sided, unbalanced contract in front of them that basically says you're not liable for anything. That doesn't make sense. So with the startups, that's really easy. Where the larger organizations are finding it difficult is to get that buy-in. And you know what happens? We often have one or two innovators within the legal team or within the legal ops team coming to us saying, we know that our templates are terrible. We know that they're very one-sided. we want to be customer focused. We want our contracts to be part of that. How can you help us? Interestingly, just a stat, and I digress a little bit, when we were at the World CC conference in Phoenix, Tim Cummins, the president, was on stage, and he was talking about recent research that World CC did. And in large organizations, approximately 26% of people touch contracts during the contract life cycle. Now, you imagine that for an organization that's got, like IBM, who had 400,000, but even who has 50,000, that's almost 30%. That's a large part of the population. Now, the legal teams are tiny in comparison to that. So does it really make sense to have contracts that only lawyers can understand? It really doesn't make sense. So getting that buy-in to sort of say, we need to change something is not too difficult. But what we find is then when we start talking about templates with the legal team, that can be a little harder, because Stefania and I talk about the comfort blankets. And I'm a lawyer. I'm a 20 years plus qualified lawyer who worked for an organization like IBM. I was brought on board initially very much to protect IBM, always to protect IBM. But increasingly, IBM did very, very much, I was on the transactional side. They wanted lawyers to help them do business. Mm-hmm. So my mindset had already changed before I left IBM. I felt that I worked closely with the business to help enable them to do business. So what we try to do is we actually start with training. We do training courses. We say to those champions who come to us, let us do a training course. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 hours. We often start with a small group of lawyers. I can tell you, we started with one big organization. They contracted with us to do 2 workshops in September. In January, we'll be on number 5 and counting. They have now given us 2 projects. We would not have been able to do that if we hadn't given our initial workshops in September, because what the workshops did is they kind of explained what is contract design, how can it help you? And we also have quite a lot of research and stats about the reaction of customers, internal stakeholders to better design contracts. So I think it has to be done small steps incrementally. Then you need to bring a champion on board within the internal organization. I find that if you can get somebody with their hand on the purse strings involved early on, where they can see that better contracts means better efficiencies and often a big saving on bottom line costs, then you'll find that the traction grows quite quickly.
Well, I think that's very interesting, to first sort of change mindsets and really train people and then move on from that. I'm also trying to better understand, you mentioned user-centric design in contract and simplification of contract. Could you maybe give an example of what that could look like, so we understand what really it is that we're focusing on when we try to make that change?
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. And to be honest, I think this has been a bit of a difficult mind shift for lawyers. And what I've seen is once the light bulb moment happens, then it starts snowballing quite quickly. And to be honest, myself, I was more than 20 years qualified before I first saw my really redesigned contract. And that was when I joined World CC. Now, I had been part intuitively during my time at IBM. I felt contracts needed to be simpler. They should be balanced if you really want to form collaborative relationships with customers. Okay, to me, that's a kind of a logical step. It's a no-brainer. So during my tenure there, I worked collaboratively with the worldwide contracts team to reshape and iterate the cloud services agreement within IBM. And actually, in terms of, I consult with an organization called TermScout. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a legal technology company that has really come to the forefront in the last couple of years. And they are now certifying in an objective way balanced contracts, whether they're more vendor favorable, more customer favorable. And the IBM contract recently got a customer favorable badge certification from TermScout. So they did a lot of work on their contract. So intuitively I was there. But then when I saw what World CC were doing, they were and Stefania Passera, they were taking things to a different level. And what Stefania does is she looks at the information on a contract, and the traditional, and I hadn't questioned this, you know, there's this, if you look at the old style contracts, you know, you start off, yes, with the recitals at the beginning, then you go into the start date, then you talk about a little bit about what's happening. Oftentimes the services are very much in the back in the schedule. So then there's pages of definitions. And by the time you get into the meat of the contract, you're not really sure where you are if you're not a lawyer. And as a result, I worked with sales teams across IBM. They all switched off. As soon as the contract came in, they handed it straight over to me saying, I can't understand it. So what we are trying to do is we're looking at who are the users of those contracts. So they're the salespeople. They're the people, the technical people who have to look at the contracts to see how they're going to implement them. They're the project managers. If you work in an organization like IBM, you will know that traditionally, most of the very large contracts, as soon as they were signed, they then had to be interpreted into a contract guide before anybody could use them. We're saying cut out that step and make the contract understandable in the first place. So we look at all the users, and if we go into a large organization, our starting point is to have a meeting with the users, trying to find out what are the kind of things that they find difficult about the current template. What are the kind of things that could help improve it? And we really work on how the information is presented. Stefania has a lot of science. She's a PhD into how the brain processes information. And the one thing we found out, the brain is very lazy. They look for the easiest way. So if you have a template of 3 columns and tiny typeface, nobody reads it. So kind of what's the point? And if it is a business to business contract that is being negotiated, these kind of contracts take a long time to negotiate, and there's back and forth of red lines. So we try to think not only about making the information more accessible, but how can we also make the contract more balanced in a way that actually helps you to build collaborative relationships. So user-centric design is not only about how the information is presented, it's also the ethos is to make business more collaborative and easier to do. And that's what Stefania and I pretty much start off every project with a balance review of terms and conditions, with suggestions about how we could change balance in a contract without making it incrementally more risky.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Actually, it's a very stark difference from what I understood of what user-centric designs really mean. I'm also wondering how this change has come about, right? Like for years, we've not touched contracts, and suddenly now we're trying to switch things up and quite a bit. So what according to you really shifted?
Yeah, you know what, Shreya, I mean, you're a lawyer. I know you trained as a lawyer, and I've had exactly the same. To be honest, I cannot, now that the light bulb has switched on, I cannot understand how it's not only for years. It's when you look at a contract 100 years ago, apart from the English has changed a bit, the style hasn't changed much at all. There really has not been much innovation in contracts at all. I think part of the reason for that, and I'm not blaming lawyers, I myself am a lawyer, but it's part of the tradition of law, isn't it? We've been trained. There's a sort of constancy. There's a tradition. This is legal talk for lawyers. And that's traditionally how contracts have been seen. And I'm not sure consciously lawyers were saying, okay, this is my area. I mean, it's a great business model, isn't it? You know, we're the only people we write the contracts, and we're the only people who can read them. So you only need to employ us to do it. So when you think about it, it's actually quite a clever business model. But I'm not sure it was really consciously done that way. I think really well, it's always the case, isn't it? You know, when you see somebody when you see somebody design a new product, and you think, my God, how come people didn't think of that, you know, 20 years ago? But I have to say, some of the lawyers have been a bit later to come to the table. I think it has been those at the forefront of legal ops, legal tech, those thinking about greater efficiencies that have probably initiated and driven this contract design. But once you do it, the penny drops and you think, this makes sense. I'm going to be very bold on this podcast, and I'm going to say in 10 years' time, I would be very surprised if you see 100-page traditional contract in any company. I just think there won't be an appetite for them anymore.
Wow, I mean, I would really love to see that, because every now and then you do have to still sign up for privacy notices, and just you're accepting to so many terms and conditions on a daily basis, and nobody's reading them. So you really don't know what you're signing up for.
Exactly. Actually, absolutely, exactly. And because I'm also very interested, apart from helping businesses, I am interested in greater access to justice for the consumer. And I think that consumer contracts have not served the consumer traditionally. And I'm delighted that we're working for a number of very large organizations now who are contracting with consumers. And they are being forced really to change their contracts to make them more understood, because the market is going that way. Mm-hmm. And it looks like, when I talk about contracts being part of your brand, if your competitors are showing more empathy or caring for their customers by actually giving them contracts they might be able to understand, then it's putting pressure on others. And I'm delighted to see that, because that can benefit the consumer.
That's actually, again, like I mean, to think about this as a means to serve justice and serve the end consumer of law is also a great way to it's a great framework to think about how all lawyers practice law, right? Because we practice law to serve the law most of the times, and not so much the end consumer or your client that's consuming the law.
Yeah. And I think that's user-centered design is very much, and I think about the consumer of the contract, whoever it might be internal stakeholders, your customers. But I definitely think with technology as well, that is going to benefit the consumer, because there's greater access to templates, information about rights, etc. And I know a couple of technologists who are focusing very much on giving greater access to law through technology to consumers and the wider public. And I'm very, very supportive of that.
Actually, it's great that you mentioned templates, right? And I know a few toolkits of sorts exist in the internet to help you do better contracting and just get use concepts of legal design. Do you have something on your mind? Do you have a few that you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I actually am an advisor to a legal technology company. They're a startup called Majoto. I don't know. Have you heard of Majoto?
I have, yes.
And Dennis, the CEO of Majoto, is a very, very creative, innovative character. And he is very much focusing on bringing technology to contract design. And, he's developing his tool out. So eventually, legal designers, contract designers, in-house teams who are looking to innovate with their contracts can use the tool as part of that contract design method. Sorry.
It's okay.
Joke again. It's a Sunday, sorry. Yeah, so Majoto is one that's really sort of trying to bring the technology together with the legal design, and I think increasingly you will see that there are other tools out there, obviously CLM tools, who are they're not actually involved in the contract design, but I think CLM tools without a doubt will operate better for you if you have uniformity in your templates, if you better design templates. When you think about artificial intelligence accessing information, if the information is easier to access in the contract rather than in tiny print within a column, then it's going to be able to give more meaningful insights to those who are trying to get those data insights. And that's a great, exciting area as well. It's the growth of data insights into contracts. For decades, contracts have held a lot of inaccessible data for organizations. And TermScout, I mentioned TermScout as well. They're really about dissecting contracts and templates and comparing them against competitors and taking all that unstructured data, creating structured data out of it and being able to access it to produce greater efficiencies for companies. And I'm all for that. When you think about it, actually, interestingly, recently, World CC did a piece of research with the European Commission about assessing a country's health, economic health and GDP through contracts, through the number of contracts they have and how contracts interact with each other. I always say contracts make the world go round, and really they do, in every shape or form, not just in the business world, but the business to consumer, even the consumer world. We're constantly contracting with each other about everything. I sort of said to my daughter today that she could have an extra £5 spending money if she tidied her room. It's all about miniature contracts throughout life, in a way, and the common thread is, if we can all simplify them and understand them, we're more likely to achieve our outcomes, our desired outcomes.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a very nice way of putting it, I think. So we'll just quickly jump to your work that you're doing currently and your current initiative called PaLiDa. What is it, and what kind of consultancy is it? Or, I mean, just like walk us through everything that it is.
Well, it's interesting because I was thinking, I was at World CC, I was the Chief Legal Innovation Advisor at World CC. I'm now their Legal Innovation Advisor in Residence at World CC. I have a great relationship with them. But for various reasons, my life, I've got an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old at home. I wanted a bit more flexibility in how I run my life. And I was increasingly getting involved in the world of legal innovation. So I decided, rather than actually work directly for someone, would it be better if I sort of consulted with, I consult with World CC, and I mentioned TermScout, I mentioned Majoto, because my interest lies in sort of two real areas. The contract design and simplification is a great passion of mine. I'm extremely passionate about it. I was turned on to this completely at World CC. I've formed a fantastic working relationship with Stefania Passera. I think we're doing fantastic things, and that's an area that we will continue to develop. At the same time, I love technology. And I met with CEOs of technology companies. It's a very exciting area. They're very innovative, very creative. Dennis, Otto from TermScout, and I thought, I want to be part of this. What I like about TermScout and Majoto, their technology with a mission. TermScout is very much aligned with World CC. They've recently entered into a partnership with World CC around making contracting better. Making contracts more understandable, more balanced, so that trade can be done in a better way and a more collaborative way around the world. So that's lovely to have that shared mission. Majoto is, furthering the concept of contract design and how you can automate it, and also how you can use design contracts within a tool. Because some of the traditional tools, by the way, some of the traditional CLMs don't deal with visualizations. Some of the sort of more innovative things in contract design can't really be used in the tool. So it's again, Majota's technology is taking it that step further, which is wonderful. So really what I found is using my background and my knowledge and my extensive knowledge of in-house, what an in-house lawyer would want: better contracts, better technology, better contract data. So my consultancy, in a way, is very holistic. It's kind of bringing it all together. And I've got something to add because of my background. I couldn't do what I've done if I hadn't spent, a large part of my career, both in private practice and in industry. So for me, it's just been the logical next step. It's a little less safe. Working for organizations such as IBM was safer. When I told my husband I wanted to do this, he said, I'll give you 12 months. I started last February, so I think 12 months is up this February, but he hasn't suggested that I go elsewhere. So far so good, and I hope it continues that way.
That's very exciting, and I really wish to see PaLiDa on the scene way beyond February 2023, and I'm sure I will. So I am very sure I will.
Thanks, Shreya.
So we'll just go and go into some really basic questions, right, and sort of wrap this up. So I'm trying to get a sense of, if somebody wants to get started as a contractual or a commercial lawyer on trying to think about how to make contracts better, or how to make contracting better or simpler, is there something they can perhaps start doing? And this can range from, hey, read this, or why don't you think about it this way, or whatever else really has helped you get onto this journey.
Yeah, well, Stefania Passera wrote a PhD in contract design, I think 4 or 5 years ago. She sent it to me, and she sends it to anybody who wants to reach out and is really, and a number of people contact her, because actually she was one of the pioneers in this. I mean, she started thinking about this about 10 years ago. She's not a lawyer, but when she started looking at contracts, she just, as a designer, she was thinking, oh, come on, there must be a better way of doing this. So I would say sort of getting out there and looking at those, and she quotes Helena Hapia, Verity White. They've written books. There are books out there now. Sarah Fox has written also a book about simplification. I haven't written anything myself as yet, but there are publications out there that you can really start to read to get yourself started. I also think, as if you are part of a larger organization, and I'm not trying to, sell myself here, but really getting that workshop, and that some people who know something about it into your team to talk about it, to show you practical tips. It really can be transformational in actually starting to get you also on that journey of actually, well, how do you really go about this? And it's all about information. It's how you structure information. It's interesting too. So when I work on the simplification projects, I work with plain language editors, and I sort of manage them. And then I add the sort of legal nuances to the text. So, and I have to say, I've learned so much through this process, and I think it's a wonderful way, rather than a lawyer just looking at the text and simplifying it. I've learned a lot from people who are not lawyers simplifying text, because you can then say, oh yes, well, they've missed that legal nuance. But also what they've done is they've done something very interesting with the text that actually has made it more understandable. And in a way, it helps to strip the legalese, because what I found sometimes with the purely legal simplifiers, they do find it quite hard to get rid of that legalese. Right. So I would say, read, watch podcasts such as this, try to get some experts, try to talk to some experts. Stefania and World CC have built a brilliant framework about how to approach there are 13 criteria in the framework. Try to get hold of that. And it's quite systematic, and it's also trying on the job. I find every contract I do, I learn a little bit more, and I kind of do it a little bit better. So it is a bit, it's like legal work in a way. It's a skill that you learn over time.
That was very, very helpful. Thank you so much for sharing those tips with us. That's all that I wanted to pick your brain on, Paula. Is there anything you'd like to say to our audience or like to close with?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love what you're doing, Shreya, because you and thank you for reaching out to me, because you reached out to me. We've been trying to connect across continents for quite some time, and I'm delighted we've done this. And actually, what I love is what you were saying about, Prologue and what you're doing with your website. And actually, I think, I'd like to touch base with you again, and I want to go onto your website. This idea of actually sharing the knowledge, having a place to go to where people can get started on innovation, because I think that's, as you say, in a way that's missing. People are thinking, where do I go? So I think what you're doing with this and sort of speaking to experts and people who are working in the marketplace is a wonderful thing. And I hope that people learn from what we've spoken about today. I'll certainly be checking in with, and do let me know if you get any other exciting people on to talk about, because I love to listen to them as well. But it's a great starting point, isn't it? Building up these, a website like yours, and I wish it great success.
Thank you so much, Paula, for all your kind words and all your wishes.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for taking the time today and having this chat with us. I have learned a lot, and I'm sure that the people who will tune in will also learn a lot, because this was so power-packed and it's so relevant to, I think, everybody who has a touch point with a contract, and that is everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, pretty much, as you say, even down to me and my daughter negotiating her pocket money this morning.
So yeah, thank you so much once again for this lovely chat. And yeah, we'll just close this.
Okay, thank you, Shreya.